But first, there's been lots of talk about climate change this week, with COP29 still making headlines. And Chris Bavin's been investigating if it could be affecting one of Britain's favourite drinks.
He visited a cider apple orchard in Devon during their autumn harvest to meet scientists who think they found a way to protect our pints.
The UK is famous for growing apples, and I know from my former job as a greengrocer that we are a nation of apple lovers.
Apples are one of, if not the most popular selling fruit. But these apples behind me aren't for eating, they're for making cider with.
But despite appearances here, cider apple trees aren't as resilient or varied as they once were. And that's why there's a new project throwing some rather tasty science at the problem, which is great news for cider makers like Barney Butterfield.
How are the sugars?
In Crediton in Devon, Barney and his team turn roughly 3,000 tonnes of apples from local orchards into cider every year.
Barney. Hi. I was just admiring the amount of barrels of cider and enormous tanks. You're obviously making quite a lot here.
You're looking at 400,000 bottles of cider in that big tank.
Wow, 400,000 bottles. It started off as a hobby, did it?
My employer was too mean to pay me enough to go to the pub as often as I wanted, so I had to make cider for myself and my friends.
But Barney's production is facing new challenges in the shape of wetter, warmer weather.
One of the biggest problems for the cider industry is the mainstay apple for many cider makers really doesn't like warm winters, so we're worried.
But now a team from the University of Bristol is trying to help. They're combing the southwest for ancient apple varieties that can handle the changing climate. Professor Keith Edwards is a gene expert on the project.
We've sampled over 10,000 apple trees from various orchards in Devon and Cornwall. From that, we've identified around 30 lost varieties.
These are apple varieties that were hiding in plain sight in very old orchards.
These trees have survived everything that nature has thrown at them for at least 100, possibly 200 years.
But as land use has changed, 80% of small plots have disappeared since 1900, and these apple varieties had been forgotten. And the loss of orchards has a broader impact because trees store up carbon emissions.
Orchards which are 100 to 200 years old, fixed a decent amount of carbon in that time, is highly sustainable.
Despite the changing conditions, the UK produces approximately 60% of the world's cider each year. And there's a reason the southwest accounts for well over half of that.
If you go back 400 million years ago, there was a mountain range sitting on top of Dartmoor, and it eroded into these valleys, and it gave us this gritty, free-draining soil, and trees love it, fruit trees particularly.
It's an apple grower's dream, isn't it?
The changing climate means that I've got to be thinking a lot harder about what we plant.
But with the findings from the research, growers can now plant these hardier varieties. That's good news for cider makers and for me, because finally I'm getting a chance to sample some cider from one of the forgotten apple varieties.
Oh, I see. I've been tirelessly hunting ancient apple varieties, and you're all tucking into the cider. Have you got one of them for me, Barney? Oh, wow. That's delicious. I know what you're thinking. I've had a tough day at the office. But if researching and identifying previously unknown apple varieties helps our cider taste better and our orchards resist climate change, well, I'll drink to that.